This is Dave with Clearwater Outfitters, and today we're going to tie the Laser Minnow. Today's pattern, the Laser Minnow, is an outstanding snook and juvenile tarpon pattern. If you're fishing regularly throughout Florida, this is definitely a must-have pattern in your fly box. I recommend carrying it at least in the colors white and black. Today we're going to tie it in purple. Chartreuse is also another excellent color. And we also in the shop carry it in a tan color because it tends to imitate a smaller size pinfish. We don't need a lot of materials for this pattern, so here they are. The Umpqua Tarpon BNX 5 in size 1 is an excellent hook. Hairline's Palmerine chenille in 15 millimeter is an excellent size. Some marabou, and then last, some 1/4 inch or 6 millimeter eyes. We'll start off the pattern, get the hook in the vise. The color thread is obviously up to you. Because we are going to build up an epoxy head around the eyes, I like to think about the color thread just because I'll be able to see it. So if I'm using a white or chartreuse, I'll use a red thread so it looks like it's kind of gills. And on some of these darker patterns, I'll go into a brighter color thread like this orange. We'll start off by getting the thread on the hook, and we'll wrap until we're just at the hook point. No part of this tie will happen after, behind that hook point. So everything we do here on in is going to be going forward. First thing that we're going to need are some marabou quills. Typically 2 nice sized quills will be sufficient for this pattern. I'm just going to match up the tips. And those that have come to our fly tying nights or heard me talk about tying flies, I'm a big fan of repeatability. And so I know for this pattern, I need about 1.5 inches. That's what it's going to take for this tail. So now I'm going to just switch over to my other hand to help with the tie-in. Just a couple tight wraps. And we'll cut off this excess. There's obviously a lot of good material that's here in this excess, so I'd encourage you to hang on to that. Could make another tail out of that. And now we're just going to tie this in, come all the way up and come all the way back. Doesn't have to be super pretty, but what really does matter is that we don't have a big bump here. We want a nice smooth transition for when we palmer our chenille on there. So that's looking pretty good. This chenille has a cord instead of a wire. If you've used a lot of EP products, you're used to the wire. So we don't have to deal with the wire here, but we do need to make sure that we tie in the cord itself, get that nice and secure. And then I'm going to advance my thread. And just to help get it out of the way, I'm going to bring that out of frame so we don't have to worry about the bobbin. With this chenille, sometimes it gets twisted up. If that happens, go ahead and try to straighten it out as much as you can, at least for the first few inches, and then start palmering. As I palmer forward, I like to keep them pretty close, so that cord is going to lay just next to itself. Doesn't need to overlap, and we don't want any spaces. So we're just going to keep doing this all the way forward. Again, just straightening it out as I go. Not overlapping, and this is the part where we had that transition where we wanted it to be nice, a nice smooth ramp. And again, we're just going to keep going round and round. There's really no danger of this cord breaking. It's pretty strong, but you also don't have to crank down on it real tight either. We're going to bring this all the way forward just to the eye itself. Stop right about here. Now our bobbin is back in position, and similar to an EP brush, I just don't want to trap any fibers if I can help it, especially forward here because this will be on the outer part of the minnow body, and that's what's going to give us our shape. So I've got 2 loose wraps on there. That'll be enough to hold it in place. Now I'm just going to stroke those fibers back, wrap on top of it. Maybe 1/8 of an inch or so, and we'll actually go just a smidgen more. And now we're going to build up a pretty thick head here. This is going to do two things. Obviously, we're securing the minnow body, but we're going to build a flat area. As you can see here, as I turn this around, I want it nice and parallel because we're going to be gluing on our eyes to that. So if there was a lot of angle in there, it'd make it harder for our eyes to go on straight. That's pretty good. We'll whip finish this. It's nice and secure. As far as the tie itself goes, we're done. Next, we're going to move into putting on our eyes. Again, 6mm 1/4 inch eyes will work really well for this pattern. If you were to make this in a larger size hook or try to make it a little bigger, a little smaller, you will definitely want to make an adjustment on the eyes because they're such an integral part of the fly itself. I've got a little gel super glue. I like to use the gel when I'm putting on eyes just because it gives me a little more control. And it doesn't take much for this. Normally if I'm super gluing on eyes, I get pretty excited almost with how much I use. I use quite a bit in the just because I don't care what anybody says. Eyes, when you super glue on eyes, they only are going to stay on for so long. They just take such a beating. So here, I'm going to glue on one eye. A little pressure is critical. Seems to be holding up okay. Now while that's setting up, before I invert the fly, I'm just going to let that kind of rest. And because I'm working with marabou, there's always a mess to be dealt with. So I always take a moment here at this point, kind of straighten up my tie-in area. Maybe it's being a little OCD, but what it does is it buys me time for this to set up. And yet I don't end up with a big mess. And like I said, marabou gets everywhere. And try to keep your significant other happy with how much of a mess you make around the house. So again, just a little bit of glue, not much at all. Because really all the glue is going to do is hold these eyes in place until I get my epoxy resin set. And of course I drop the eye. And like with all eyes, we want to make sure that this is going to be a mirror image of the other side. Particularly in this case, they just need to be parallel. So I'm looking around to the other side. It's pretty close. And the gap that forms in between these eyes is going to get filled with some UV resin. The resin I've been using lately is Loon UV Thick. You definitely want the thicker stuff. If you have a preference for another type of resin, that's fine. Use your favorite, whatever that is. So we'll let that set up for a little bit there. That one's a little looser, so we'll see how it holds. There you go, it's very similar. I'm going to start with the bottom just because it's a little bit smaller area void to fill. These applicator tips are great for this part. We don't have to get it all in the first shot. First application that is. Got a little bubble in there. Get that popped. Give it a second to set up in there. Give it a good 4 or 5 count. We don't have to worry about those eyes moving now. Now we're going to fill up the other side. If you have also thin UV, it's nice to do a thin coat on the outside of the eyes and right up over top of this area that we're doing to just really encapsulate the eyes, and you end up with a quite durable fly. For the flies that we make here in the shop, if you buy one of these laser minnows from us, we actually do an even a little bit more durability. That final thin coat is 30-minute epoxy, which requires the flies to go on a drying wheel for a few hours really for it to fully cure. And so from here on out, we would add just a thin layer on the outside, like I said. But that right there is a laser minnow. It's small, but the snook and especially the juvenile tarpon lose their mind over this thing. You can find links to all the materials required for this pattern in the description below, so be sure to check that out. Anything you need will be right there. And if you just don't feel comfortable trying to attempt this tie, I'd encourage you to give it a go. Or you just want to have a good example to look at while you're tying, These flies are available on tailwatershop.com. If you enjoyed this video and like this tie, we encourage you to hit the like button and of course subscribe to all of our other videos. And if you have any recommendations for flies that you'd like to see us tie, please let us know. Leave it in the comments, but reach out to us, let us know what patterns you'd like to see, and we'll get them put up in the future.